and good evening. Welcome to Joe's Sports Channel. And if you're wondering where Joe is, he's a little bit under the weather tonight. So you got myself. I'm usually the sidekick. So filling in on Joe's Sports Channel. And welcome. And we got our special guest tonight, Jim Barker. So we are going to talk a little bit about the Super Bowl. As we know, that has been all the hype and the talk today and yesterday. Everybody watching the Super Bowl. So so welcome. Let's welcome Jim Barker. You might know Jim watching the CFL and also as our TSN analyst. I like watching him on the show and getting feedback with the panelists. But let's go to Jim and talk a little bit about the Super Bowl and get some thoughts on. Did you get a chance to watch the game yesterday, Jim?
Oh, of course. It was, it was an intriguing game that everybody had talked about and I think played out maybe a little different than a lot of people thought. And, but it was one of those things that through the year, Kansas City had problems. And there was, they won a lot, 10 games. They came from behind to win. And Mahomes was magic in the last 3 minutes. And personally, I got lost in that. And I said, well, there's no way I would ever pick against him.
Exactly, yeah.
But when you look at that game going in, 2 years ago, they beat Kansas City beat Philadelphia to start the three-peat 38-35. But since that time, Kansas City has pretty much stayed status quo. They've lost a couple of receivers. They've lost a couple of offensive linemen. But when you look what Philadelphia's done, they've added the best running back in the game. They've added the best defensive coordinator in the game.
Vic
A.J.
Fangio,
Brown has established himself as a player where he hadn't prior to that with Philadelphia. I just think when you look at what each team has done, this team physically was it was a mismatch. I mean, I hate to say it was a mismatch, but it was that first series of the second half. When Mahomes got sacked, I said, "That's it, game over. It's done."
Yeah, and like you said, everybody's like, even at halftime, it's 24-0. Mahomes, still everybody's that Mahomes magic. He'll find a way, kind of like Tom Brady. I think it's because we're so used to seeing Brady doing it. Mahomes is kind of in that category, or we put him in that category right now. But says, he'll find a way. Like the offense will just show up, but. I think for me, I was just stunned I've never seen Mahomes manhandled or panicked. Like I didn't see, even when he did have a chance to pass, none of those passes look clean. And like everybody says, the players were dropping the ball. But if you look at the pass, like a lot of them, they just wasn't a lot of zip. He was just rushed, trying to get the ball out just to get it out of his hands. But he held on. I thought he held on to it longer than usual. He just seemed to be from panic mode the whole game.
Well, he was just never comfortable in the pocket.
Yes.
When you look at their tackles, Jawan Taylor led the league in penalties. He had more penalties than anybody and just struggled all year at right tackle. And then they moved Thuney out to play in left tackle.
Yes.
And, one of the things about playing tackle in the NFL is having long arms. And Thuney got moved in college from tackle to guard because he's got short arms. And it's just hard for him on the edge to keep the separation from the pass rusher. And it happened time and time again where they got into his body and he couldn't handle it and then handle them, and they would just spin off. They didn't let Mahomes get around the sides. They forced him to go through the middle, and then their interior. I mean, the key to the whole game was Philadelphia did not blitz. They rushed 4 guys, and they physically beat them so bad up front. When you rush 4 guys and can pressure the way they pressured, you can do so many things with your secondary in terms of combination zones, doubling people, and Mahomes was obviously confused. He went back. He thought he saw things, was getting ready to throw, and couldn't because there was either a second DB right there because of something they had done in disguise of the coverage, which they were allowed to do because they only brought 4. And when you can pressure a team rushing 4, if you notice Kansas City, when they rushed 4, it was like
Hurts would take
Hurts
off
had all day.
Oh
He
yeah.
just sat back there and he had all day. I mean, I just never felt like he was pressured. And a lot of that has to do with the Philadelphia's great running game. Hurts 2 years ago against them set a Super Bowl record for quarterback rushing. He rushed for 70 yards. And
Yeah.
obviously, that played into, you can't rush so vertical upfield when you're worried about this guy getting a lane and running. And so that affected their pass rush, gave him all day, and he was very accurate. And, between Devontae Smith and Brown and, they're just Goddard, their tight end. They just, again, the receiving core just got open, and they didn't need Saquon. Saquon, they did a great job of defending him.
I
And
know. That's why I thought it
if
was
they're,
amazing because they
yeah,
said
if Spagnola's plan was we're gonna stop Saquon,
yep.
and if Jalen Hurts can drop back and beat us, God bless him. Well, God blessed him.
He did.
And they scored 40, and it could have been more. It was a drubbing.
And I think that's why I was so stunned. I think like everybody, because the Chiefs, the two-time, they were going to be the three-peat. So they were kind of on that mountaintop, and for the Eagles just to come in and dominate the way they did, like you said, it was that front four. And I know with Kansas City, their defense, Spagnuolo, I have a lot of respect. I said, man, this guy knows he'll find a way to stop Saquon. So they did, but then when they showed it was like the parting of the sea. Jalen Hurts, it was like what he would just took off for like 20, 30-yard runs, and it was just amazed. So, okay, you contain Saquon Barkley, but now I think Hurts had probably more rushing yards than Saquon. So they still got their 200 plus yards. Which again,
and part of the reason the receivers were so open was they were dedicating that extra guy out of the secondary, rolling down into the box to help take a gap away. And I know Spagnuolo said the key for them was to stay square and plug their gaps. And to do that, you have to bring somebody out of the secondary. And when you do that, that now makes things one-on-one. And, there's nobody going to cover A.J. Brown. You're just not going to cover him one-on-one. Devontae Smith. Those guys are very, very good receivers. And, they had the kid step up. I can't remember his name now, who caught the first touchdown pass. And, nobody had even heard. I hadn't heard of him.
Dotson.
Yeah. So he was, he played great. But that's what happens when you have the threat of Saquon Barkley. And, they haven't needed it. I mean, everybody else they played, Saquon Barkley was breaking big runs.
I'm still stunned, I think, for me, that the Giants got rid of him or didn't re-sign him. It was good. I felt good for him. I thought, he was with the Giants for, 4 or 5 years and didn't even make a playoff. And now first year with the Eagles, and boom, straight to the big game. And again, he was 200 yards every year, 200 yards. So like you said, that threat was there. And now the Chiefs knew they had to defend that, but it left, like you said, Brown, pass to Brown, boom, catches it, and he's gone to the end zone. And same with Dotson, like all left the receivers one-on-one. So it made it tough to defend, knowing that they had to pressure and take away the run game. And then when they did step back, so I looked at Jalen Brown, and as soon as that O-line parted, it was like the parting of the Red Sea there. He just took on, he had like 20, 30 yards up the gap. So I think it was like, okay, if we try to cover this, it's like no matter what they tried to do, I think the Eagles, based on what you also mentioned, they added so many key pieces on offense and defense from the first time they lost. Was a close game, and then like you said, they went and rebuild. Whereas the Chiefs, I thought they did add. There was a few players, like I thought D-Hop was really going to make a difference for them, and he had a few passes, but I can't say he was a difference maker in the game.
No, he had that big drop in the first half, which they're just trying to get things going, and he dropped the pass on third down, and it was like you could kind of feel the air go out then. It was like, wow, this is not our day, because he doesn't do that.
And even
And
Chris Jones looked uncomfortable. Like he was having these. So again, I think there were just the whole team. It's almost felt like, hey, if we just show up, we're gonna win. But it's like it didn't seem to happen this time. Like from the get go, I was stunned. Like the first series, they were 4-0. But like I said, Mahomes made some characteristic. Like I said, the secondary, like that one pass where they ran it back for a touchdown. I thought, well, that's unusual. Like I was trying to say, what was Mahomes looking at? Like how did the defense disguise who was he going to? But again, it was just amazing that it's just something you don't normally see from Mahomes.
yeah, well, on that one, he was pressured and moved out. And I think the other thing that people forget about is Philadelphia's got the best offensive line in football, the
Yeah,
biggest and the best. I mean, they're good. And they lost Jason Kelsey at center, and Jurgens has stepped in and not been quite the player Jason Kelsey was, but
yeah,
they've been dominant up front. And when you get to games like that, it comes down to the lines.
yes,
I've always
the
believed that,
trench. Yeah,
same thing happened in the Grey Cup. I felt like in the Grey Cup, beat Winnipeg on both lines, both the offensive and defensive line.
yeah, and that too. And going back to the Grey Cup, I did watch that, and again, I was stunned. I thought, boy, Winnipeg was. I called it. I said, Winnipeg's the team. They're going to win it, but things. I think they did go well. They did go their way, but it didn't go so good. Or no, so it didn't go their way. The Argonauts just again seemed to dominate. So I was just stunned at.
It's
Again,
because of the lines, and people don't pay enough attention
in the trenches.
that
Yeah.
that's where you win. Mike Holmgren was a good friend of mine, and he said we couldn't win until I got Reggie White in Green Bay, and he
That's a big
changed
guy.
our complete front. Everything became different when we
Yeah.
got Reggie White. You have to have a couple of guys on that side of the ball on both fronts, both offensive line and defensive line. The thing Toronto has had, since I was there, is great offensive lines. They've
Yes.
drafted well. They've had great offensive lines, physical offensive lines. They can run the ball and they protect the quarterback. When you have that, you're always going to have a chance to win. And
Yes.
again, that's when it came to the Grey Cup. Everybody picked when I picked Toronto. You go back and watch the beginning of the game, and Jim Barker picked Toronto to win.
You're right.
Game.
Yeah.
And it was because of the lines. I just felt like, and in this game, same thing. And it was so obvious that, I mean, it took about halfway through the first quarter, and you could see Kansas City was in big trouble. You could look at Andy Reid. He knew, he's trying to have guys chip, which they obviously hadn't worked on because they were chipping them right off the tackle. And it was like they just didn't execute the chip well because they haven't had to do it all year.
Yeah.
He felt like they needed to do it against this front. So now they're starting to chip. They kept Kelsey in, and he was struggling to block.
He was no catches till the second half. So yeah.
It was a case of, I think it was one of those deals that Andy Reid, I'm not sure, believed how much better they were up front than Kansas City. Because his game plan, he didn't do anything. He didn't change his game plan at all for the fact that we aren't as good up front. And it's hard to beat a team. When you're not as good up front, it's hard to win. It really is.
You're in scramble mode. And I think you mentioned about Joe Thuney. So normally, like you said, he was playing tackle. And I think they mentioned that he hadn't played that position since college. So I didn't know why.
No, he didn't play in college. They moved him from tackle to guard.
Oh, to guard. Okay.
He's got extremely short arms.
Yeah.
And so when that happens at tackle, you have to use your arms basically as a separator.
Right.
And at tackle, when you have those speed guys, you have to keep them away from you because your feet aren't going to be good enough for the tackle to block those real quick. Like Sweat was just killing them.
Oh, yeah.
But he was in Tooney's body because Tooney didn't have the separator. His arms are so short, he couldn't. And again, it just caught up to him. And he had played real well about probably the last 3 weeks or so, but Tooney had a tackle. But he got exposed big time in this one for in terms of being able to protect those edge pass rushers, because Philadelphia just, I mean, they have a lot of guys that you don't know. I mean, Graham, I mean, guys they're
That's
not
right.
names you hear about a lot, but they are true edge pass rushers, inside player. They dominated all the way across the defensive front and the offensive line. And it was a
Yeah.
thing of beauty for a football fan, for just watching as a fan. That to me was a thing of beauty, because it was 40-22, but that score could have been 60-10. It was just a absolute manhandling.
And I think that's why, again, being the top, again, the Chiefs have been the top team for the last 2, 3, they've dominated. And that's why it was just surprising to see almost how easily that the Eagles handle them. So I think, because even the Bills, I picked Buffalo, going back, as I said, Buffalo, and they came up just short. I kind of felt bad, again, that opportunity to get there. So I'm not sure Buffalo would have done any better. But again, it was good to see. And I still thought, okay, the Mahomes magic. So even though they were down 24-0 at the half, I thought, okay, they'll shake off the rest, whatever it is. But when that first series came, that again, they just started the second half. They were back in there. Mahomes threw a pick again. And I said, okay, that's when I said it's over. Because again, I said, wow, the start of the second half, I thought they'd kind of hit the reset button, get it together. Looked like he was kind of doing some short passes just to get things going, just to get the flow. But when he threw that pick, I was like, okay, that's it. 2 picks. Like, you don't see Mahomes throw 2 picks and
No.
get sacked 6 times. Like, I think that's what stunned me. It's like how many times he was sacked, like under pressure. I said, I've never seen that from Mahomes and the Chiefs. So I knew the Eagles were the number 1 defense, but like you said, in the trenches are where the battles are won and lost, and it really showed in that game. But again, I'm not sure what the Chiefs do to retool, but it'd be interesting to see, are the Eagles, I mean, they're the top team. Are they going to be able to, walk it back again next year? Can they repeat next year? Are they going to be the next,
the next team to try to repeat? Well,
yeah,
they're built to win. I mean, again, they didn't make it last year. I don't know. Hurts got hurt, I think, and they lost something during the playoffs thing.
I know. It was funny because they were calling for Sirianni's head. Like they lost the Super
they
Bowl
started
the
out
following
2-2.
year, it's like, oh, get rid of him, fire. He's terrible. No, right. And I'm thinking he went from that to, again, add a few more pieces. I was at Howie Rosen, made it, a few adjustments, brought in some players, and just those tweaks that he did. And just like that, now you'll go from, 0 to hero just like that.
Yeah. And they're when you're built strong on the offensive line and strong on the defensive line, you can absorb a few losses, and you can hopefully develop those guys that are playing behind those guys now. Because as long as you're good on both lines, you're going to have a chance. And when you got Saquon Barkley in your backfield, and you have a young Jalen Hurts who is, he's proven to everybody he can win in this league consistently. And I know there's a lot of people that didn't think he could do it. I was one of them. I didn't think he threw well enough, but he throws every bit you need.
Oh.
And he runs so effectively. And again, what are they going to do with that receiving core? How many are they going to keep? You never know. But I just think that team is built for success for a longer term. So they'll be a threat for sure. They'll be a threat. Kansas City is the one I think that has to worry a little bit, because they got an aging Chris Jones that was obviously beat to hell by halftime.
Yeah.
He was done. When he went out, he was done. He was done. Yeah. And when you have those big physical guys, the play he got that did him in was when they did the tush push on the one, and he just, it's like Jason Kelsey was talking about it before the game, how it's all about leverage.
Yes.
And then once the center gets leverage, it's impossible. You can't stop it.
Can't stop it. Yeah.
And it's just very hard physically on the body. And he was done after that play. After they quarterback sneaked it, that was it. Chris Jones was done. So I think they've got some issues on defense to deal with. I think they've got, obviously, the offensive line issues. between the tackles. They've got to get that thing rectified, get their guys back. And I know they lost their left tackle. I can't think of who it was, but they've got to get their offensive line squared away. And as long as you have Patrick Mahomes, again, I picked Buffalo also. And after that game, I said, I'll never do it again because he's just that good. He can do it by himself. And obviously he can't.
Yeah.
And he proved that he's human. And he proved that if you're that much better up front, put Patrick Mahomes. Doesn't matter who you put there.
Well, and the interesting thing, I was listening to Tom Brady, and they were praising Tom Brady, and he had 7 Super Bowls, but he said, I feel for Mahomes. I understand where he's at, because he said, even though I've won 7, he said it's the 3 that I lost that are constantly in my mind. The three that I lost are the ones that bother me the most. I think it was when he was in Tampa Bay, but he said those are the ones that stick with you most, because you're always thinking, what could I have done different? How, and he said probably Mahomes again now, because the Eagles lost 2 years ago. They retooled, made adjustments. So now I'm thinking, boy, now the Chiefs are kind of in the same boat. Now they've got to go back to the drawing board. It's okay. They offensive line, I think, has been a problem over the years, but I thought they had everything fixed, right? I thought they had the defense. And again, with Spagnuolo on the defense, again, I thought they were set. But obviously, it's games like this that kind of, when those things go wrong, you say, okay, this is what we need to do. This is what we have to fix.
Yeah, because that game was not about anything except a physical dominance. The Philadelphia Eagles 2 lines dominating the Kansas City Chiefs 2 lines. It was a straight personnel issue. And either the Kansas City front office addresses it and they go and they get their 2 lines able to deal with it, or they'll be in the same situation.
And the other thing that kind of stood out to me through the playoffs for the Eagles, I think back to the NFL draft, and there was one player in particular, was Carter. I think it was Jalen Carter. I want to say not that nobody wanted to draft him, but he was a great player, and he kept falling and falling because they thought he was problematic.
Right.
And then the Eagles took a chance on him, and I mean, boy, he paid dividends. He was a monster for them to try to handle. Like him, whether it was even before the Super Bowl, like going through when they played Washington, when they played, he just dominated, chasing down Jalen Daniel. So I thought, boy, here was a player. I think he had something to prove from the draft, that he fell many spots that other teams weren't willing to take a chance on him because of whatever history or track record he had. And but say, hey, I proved myself. Now I'm worth my weight in gold. So
the middle linebacker they got, Sean, I think.
Deshaun. Oh, he was
He was. I mean, that guy came. They got him as a free agent for nothing.
Yeah.
And he never played. He was a special teams guy. He becomes the Mike linebacker, and he's all pro. And, those are the kind of things. And a lot of it, so much for a player, is getting with the right organization. And when you get with an organization that understands your strengths, understands how you fit, it makes all the difference in the world. And, I think when you look around, you can look around the league, there are players that, Sam Darnold is a great example,
Yep.
I had a guy in the XFL, Tommy Maddox, who played for me.
Tommy Maddox.
Now, he had played
Pittsburgh.
8 or 9 years with Denver behind John Elway.
Yes.
And they had him running John Elway's offense, which isn't what Tommy could do. Tommy didn't have that big, strong arm. Tommy had a great release and was accurate underneath. And he could do like the things people are doing today. He couldn't run that Dan Reeves play action, deep, comebacks. And he couldn't do what Elway did. So he came and played with us in the XFL, ended up being the MVP, then went to the Steelers and took them, and was very good with the Steelers after that.
Yeah.
But it's figuring out what a guy can do. And that's what the Eagles did with that guy. Vic Fangio, that defensive coordinator they brought in when they lost their defensive coordinator as the head coach in Arizona, Philadelphia. They bring in Vic Fangio, and he's done absolute miracles with that defense. And those guys believe, and They play like him. They're very nondescript. He doesn't say much. He doesn't smile, and his team plays that way. And so it's Steve Spagnuolo he's won more Grey Cups than any defensive coordinator. But no matter what he did, he just didn't have the horses he needed. He needed to bring six to get pressure. He needed to bring extra bodies to get pressure, and Fangio didn't. Fangio didn't think his secondary could handle it, so he didn't even bother with it and put it on the 4.
Yeah, and I like that Vic Fangio. That was kind of you hitting the mountaintop for him because coming out of Denver, he took a lot of heat. He was terrible. He was washed up. Time to retire. He kind of went through that, and then the Eagles again taking a chance on him, pick him up, defensive coordinator, and now again he's got that Super Bowl status and that hey, maybe he can be. I don't know if he's going to be a head coach again somewhere, but
No.
again. But he did a phenomenal job with the defense, right? So I guess it'd be kind of like trying to put Steve Spagnuolo as a head coach too somewhere. But he works good. He's good in his role in what he does, right? So kind of
Yeah.
what you were saying, people fit a certain place and they're good at what they do. And I think it's going to be interesting to see now with Kellen Moore. I think it's Kellen Moore, the offensive coach
Going
coordinator
to New Orleans.
going to New Orleans because I thought, wow, the Saints they have a new coach because I think the coach there for the Eagles was saying it was kind of hoping I think they could walk it back and keep him, but sounds like he's already going to New Orleans. So again, gonna be interesting to see coming from the Cowboys and now an offensive coach for the Eagles. Can he take on a head coaching role? Again, that's a whole other realm. I mean, I seen it with my 49ers. Robert Saleh went to the Jets. And again, I don't know if he had issues trying to work with Aaron Rodgers, and now Aaron Rodgers is on the go again. Again, there's the whole carousel with coaches and quarterbacks, and interesting to see where Aaron Rodgers is going to go next too now.
Well, and it's also interesting to think about what Aaron Glenn is going to do. He was a great defensive coach under Dan Campbell, a very strong head coach, and
Yes.
now it's his show. And it becomes a completely different kettle of fish than what he's been dealing with. And I know myself because I was best. And now that it's hindsight, I can look back. Everybody wants to be a head coach. I was at my best as a coordinator. That's where I was at my best. My last 3 years as a coordinator, I won championships, Grey Cups and XFL championships. And then became a head coach. And then once you do that,
it's a different.
It's like now you're kind of labeled as, you're a head coach, and it's just that was never what I was good at. It was never what I was, and it was never what I enjoyed the most. And I think that happens to a lot of these guys. Dan Quinn is interesting because he's a lot like Belichick. Dan Quinn went to Atlanta the way Belichick went to Cleveland.
Yeah.
Then Belichick leaves Cleveland, goes to New England, gets Tom Brady, and the rest is history. He's the greatest coach in the history
greatest coach
of
all time. Whereas in the Browns, I mean, it was him and Bernie Kosar or whoever. There was always that great battle. This is the problem. They couldn't find what the problem is. Well, let's get rid of the coach. So must be.
Yeah.
Belichick.
So that the whole thing about trying to predict who can be a great head coach, it's I worked with Mike Holmgren, and from the time he came from as a high school coach, worked with us as our quarterback coach, and you could just sense he was going to be a better head coach than coordinator. He just was. That was what he was.
Yeah.
In Canada, you look around and you say, where these great head coaches? Well, Ryan Dinwiddie has become a great head coach, and I think enjoys being a head coach and is having success there. It's just some guys do, some guys don't. And it's, Mike O'Shea was, I think, on the cusp of being fired, gets Zach Caleros. All of a sudden now he's Bill Belichick,
Yeah.
But,
and it's funny you're talking about head coaches. Again, I'm thinking of Mike McCarthy, the goes to the Cowboys from the Packers. And again, this was the guy that was going to bring him to that next level. And now he's kind of out looking for. I don't think he's been hired or out looking for a new job too.
Yeah, but that's Jerry Jones. And we talked about this,
That's a
Johnny.
whole other.
We talked about this where what makes great organizations is great ownership and from the top up. And Jeffrey Lurie with the Eagles
Yes.
and Clark Hunt with the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Those are two of the best. They stay out of the way and they let their football people do their jobs.
Yes.
But you look at other places, Woody Johnson and with the Jets, Bidwell with the Cardinals, they're never going to win. They're never going to win. Haslam with the Browns. I mean, how are those teams ever going to win with those people as like Jacksonville, and Jacksonville goes and fires Doug Peterson, okay, who had taken the Eagles to a Super Bowl. They fire him and they end up hiring Liam Cohen. Now, when you fire somebody, you should have an idea of this is the person we want to hire.
Yeah.
And they had I don't know. I watch the way some of these teams operate and it just makes me shake my head because it's you're not going to get better. Just, maybe Liam Cohen ends up becoming the next Bill Belichick.
Who knows?
I don't know. All I know is that he wasn't a guy that they said, this is who we want to be our head coach. This is who I can see with the Jets where they said, we're going to get Aaron Glenn. Before they let go of Saleh, they had in their mind, Aaron Glenn's going to come back here where we drafted him, and he's what we need. And they very well could have fired him knowing they were going to hire Aaron Glenn. Now, maybe I'm giving him too much credit, but that's the way you would like to see an organization function.
Yeah.
So
that's okay.
I don't know.
I was happy to see Robert Saleh leave the Jets, bring him back home where he belongs, get my 49ers back on track on that defense, which has been horrible, giving up 30, 40 points a game. So I'm hoping that gets us back on track. But yeah, with Doug Peterson and I really hope the Jaguars, I thought with him at the helm, you got Trevor Lawrence, you got a veteran, a great quarterback. And I thought it just never seemed to come together. It just never seemed to happen for them.
Yeah.
So, and again, it's always the coach that takes the fall, right? Or takes the blame. Same with the Cowboys. Well, they're not winning, so it must be Mike McCarthy's fault. So we'll get rid of him and let's try, the next guy in the carousel. So,
well, Jacksonville, I mean, they not only so Liam Cohen, he's going home and must have said, I'm not going to go with Trent Baalke, who is the GM. So what does the owner do? He fires Trent Baalke. And it's like, I don't know. It's kind of crazy the way. I just think he goes to ownership first, and then to the structure of the organization and the strength on the top is everything. And when you have owners who are trying to do too much, and I've worked with one of those guys in Calgary. His son was a quarterback, and that's why he bought the team. And if you don't think that kind of stuff affects a team, it does. When that owner is involved to that extent, it does affect the team. And I think you look in the NFL and you can see example after example of teams with owners that are just bad.
And that's why you think, well, what is wrong? Why is it the teams like the Jets always struggle? Why is it teams like the Chicago Bears, always struggle? Or the Jaguars say, why is it, certain teams excel all the time, regardless of, who they drafted? And, there's teams that like the Cleveland Browns, year after year, they get a number one pick. Now, the Lions, again, loved Dan Campbell, did a great job, fell bad from the playoffs. The defense just didn't seem to have it. But again, it was so I like to see those stories where the Lions for years terrible. I know Joe Booney's I guess he's a Green Bay Packers fan, but they struggled, and then now they're kind of they were working their way up to the top of the mountain, but yeah, why is it some teams continue to struggle despite year after year of a number one draft pick? They get all the best players. They have all the best opportunities. Even the Cleveland Browns, they have all the opportunities, but why do they always struggle to even make it, get out of the starting blocks? So, but again, it's great ownership.
Green Bay is a little different situation. It's probably the most like Saskatchewan, the community-owned type thing.
Yeah.
And they don't have a true owner. So they need that strong figurehead. They need that Mike Holmgren. They need that Vince Lombardi. They need that guy who is the strong figurehead. Is LaFleur that guy? I'm not. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, the way they handled the whole Aaron Rodgers when he left thing,
Yeah.
it was. Again, you look at how Aaron Rodgers came in when they got rid of Brett Favre, and they
Similar.
just did it right.
Yeah.
But then from that point on, it just kind of went downhill, and I don't know. It's again, it's there's somebody got to be in that organization that it becomes a figurehead and has the confidence of not just the people in his organization, but throughout the league, people know that he knows what he's doing, or she knows what they're doing. And there's women now that are coming along, and there'll be one who comes in and becomes a key person in building one of these teams that becomes, dominant. So
yeah, which is great. I mean, you're seeing more and more of that opportunities at different levels, or they're getting, not just ownership. I know, they announced the Chicago Bears owner just passing away. McCaskey. Yeah. So, she just passed, again, a great lady, and the same with the Lions. The Lions, again, great ownership team. So I think that's why for me, I'm always excited with the 49ers. Jed York, he just kind of tell me what you need and I'll get out of the way, right? He lets John Lynch, he lets Shanahan go to work. I know those guys take a lot of the heat when things go bad like they did this year, but again, I think if we get the 49ers.
But the 49ers started with Eddie DiBartolo.
Yes.
And he
My
was
Italian
the one who got
ownership.
them started on the right path of this is how you own a football team.
Yes. Yeah. But I guarantee, so I guess kind of like you said, there's a pattern there with the ownership and what needs to be done. And like you said, you see where the same teams continue to struggle. So we've got the draft coming up. What's that, in April? And again, we said the CFL, we were talking a little bit early before. So we see the NFL and CFL
for
draft
fans, for fans, something interesting for them to watch. So there'll be Canadians that are in the draft, and the Canadian draft is April 29th. The weekend before, so it will be the 26th, 27th, is the NFL draft, because where a player is drafted, a Canadian player is drafted in the NFL. We'll take Curtis Rourke as an example, the quarterback from Indiana.
That's right.
Where he's drafted, if he's drafted in the 3rd or 4th round in the NFL or higher, he probably either won't get drafted or he'll be drafted in the 6th round. But if he's not drafted till the 7th round, 6th or 7th round, he could go as high as the 1st or 2nd round in the Canadian draft, which I think is still a bit of a stretch, because I just think he's got a couple years before you're going to see him. And that's the beautiful thing about the Canadian draft is you have to take players. Last year there was a Kyle Hergel from Boston College. He was the 3rd player taken by the Rough Riders, by Saskatchewan, in the Canadian draft, after he had gone, I believe he might have been drafted in the 7th round by New Orleans. And again, you figure, well, he's going to get cut and make it and eventually come back up to you. If you're going to take him 3rd overall, you'd like to see him in the next, 2 to 3 years. But of course, now he's made there. He's going to be around there again. I'm sure they'll keep him at least one more year. So it's going to be 3 years before they get him. Sage Dockstader, who's a big tackle from New Mexico State that the Argos drafted maybe 4 years ago. They're going to get him this year. So after all his runs through the NFL, they're going to get him this year. So again, it's such a fascinating thing. The whole Canadian draft, NFL draft, it's something for people who are real fans. Get into that part of it. What Canadians are getting drafted down in the States? And if they're not drafted, are they signed the first day? Because that will affect where they get drafted in the Canadian draft. And to me, it's the most fascinating of all drafts anywhere in the world. No, there's nothing like it.
Yeah, no, like you said, it was exciting to see that the Canadian players, and we were talking backstage too, how in the NBA we're getting the Canadian players, getting more notoriety in the NBA and also the NFL. So it's great for the Canadian players up and coming because we always think, oh, Canada's secondary, we're second best, but we're starting to get some notoriety and some respect in the NFL draft. So that's great to see, not just for the NFL, but also for the CFL. So again, getting that respect. Hey, we do produce great players here in Canada. So again, lots happening. So lots of happening in the football world. So football season, I want to say it's done. I never feel it's ever done. The Super Bowl's done, and now it's back to retooling. So who do we add to our teams? And the NFL, and even with the CFL is only a couple of months away. So the draft is next in April, and then preseason's already set for May. So lots of exciting action in the football field, and we know baseball is going to take stage next, or the hockey season as well.
Pitchers and catchers reported today.
Yeah, I know. So that's what I love about sports. I mean, there's always something happening. It's never, oh, well, it's, football's done until, September now. It's like, nope, there's always something happening. The draft is happening. And again, great to see we get some Canadian notoriety. So, well, I think that's our time for today. Thanks, Jim, so much for stopping
Johnny.
by. We appreciate your time. As I said, I would love to come visit you at the TSN stage there and meet Matt Dunnigan and some of the other crew.
Good stuff.
Thanks again for taking time on Joe's Sports Channel. As you're probably wondering where Joe is, for those that are tuned in late, unfortunately, Joe is under the weather. As you know, here in Canada, we got our sub-zero temperatures, and Joe's not quite conditioned yet for the Canadian weather. But so he's under the weather, but he'll be back next time. Thanks again to everybody tuning in, watching Joe's Sports Channel tonight. Thanks again to our special guest, Jim Barker, talking about the Super Bowl, our Canadian football players. Look for the draft coming up in April. And the CFL season's just around the corner as well. So, and the XFL, we didn't get to that, but I still like watching the XFL myself.
March, they'll be kicking off in March.
So again, there's football season's never done. There's always more. So again, thanks everybody for watching, and thanks again for stopping by. I don't know. Oh, there we go. All right. Well, thanks again to our special guest, Jim Bark, for stopping. And thank you to the Booney Believers. Stay tuned, keep watching, and watch Joe's Sports Channel. I'm sure we're going to have more great sports action coming your way. We're going to try to get some more podcasts out in the coming weeks. Lots to talk about. I know football season's done, but lots of hockey action. As we know, we got the Canadian series coming up this week with Canada, U.S., Sweden, and who was the Finland. So lots of great sports action coming up this week. Stay tuned, and stay tuned to Joe's Sports Channel. Thanks for watching. Have a great night.